Hi, I'm Sandra Breen, born 1943 in an inner city suburb of Sydney, New South Wales. I am the fourth of 5 children and the second of 2 girls. I was a shy child and did not easily make friends. My sister, though, was bubbly, outgoing and had lots of friends. I found myself living in her shadow, although I realise now this was totally my own doing. We started dance classes when my sister was 6 and I was 3, and I totally loved everything about it. On Mondays we had ballet in a converted lounge room in my street. When I was a little older, other classes were in the next suburb, a tram ride away. Tram fare was 1 penny each way. Even as a youngster, I travelled alone or sometimes with my sister on the tram to and from dance class. My mum worked at Volley, making trainers or running shoes as we would now know them. Later she worked at Colgate-Palmolive. The dance uniform at that time was a white tunic-style dress with matching bloomers. Not incredibly attractive by today's standards. My mother, of course, sewed these for us. We did not have a car and my dad never drove, but public transport was always frequent and available. My grandparents were custodians of a sawmill in Manly. We would catch the ferry across the harbour to visit them. I remember their house being high on a hill and the sawmill like a quarry below. We were able to play on the hand trucks they used to move the timber around. One child on each end pushing hard on a pump-like handle to move the tray-style vehicle along the track. Great fun, and probably dangerous. During the war, women and children were moved out of the city. We shared a house with 2 other families in Woy Woy on the central coast of New South Wales. Some weekends my dad would take the 2 to 3 hour bus trip to visit. All the kids, 11 in all, some blonde, brunette and redheads, would wait at the bus stop and greet him with, "Daddy, Daddy!" He always brought chocolate. My brothers and mates played marbles in the backyard and sometimes they let me join in. Some types of marbles were greatly prized and I was not to handle any of these. They also put together homemade billy carts which they rode down our hill. I was not allowed to participate in this, so dangerous. No TV, of course, and we had a big radio console in the corner of the kitchen. We listened to Green Bottle, Blue Hills, and other popular series of the time. We also had a wind-up gramophone and some 78 RPM records. Our next-door neighbour was the only house in the street with a telephone, and they took messages for our little community. My friend, a few doors away, learnt piano. She taught me to play and I taught her my dance moves. No one could really afford more than one activity at that time. I loved learning piano and still play some of the pieces I learnt back then. Later in Brisbane I also learnt the clarinet, guitar and bass guitar. There was a time I was part of a folk group that played at folk mass in our local church. When I was about 9 I danced weekly on radio. It was a live audience in tiered seating similar to today's TV programs. The program host was Uncle Tom and the sponsor was Aeroplane Jelly. At the beginning of the show, people would call out their favourite flavour and Uncle Tom would then toss jelly packets into the audience. The flavour I thought was both hilarious and weird for a jelly was port wine. After Saturday class, my dance teacher would bundle 6 or 8 of us into her station wagon, all in the back with no seat belts, and drive us to 2SM studios to perform for the audience. A great time for all of us. My cousin, who lived in our street, had 6 children of his own, but would occasionally take me and my siblings, along with his own brood and others in the street, to the beach. He drove a red vehicle similar to a utility truck with a wooden tray and built-up wooden seats along the sides. These all appeared to be homemade. There was a small rail around the edges and all us kids would hold on tight to remain in the vehicle. No seat belts. We had wonderful fun on these trips and sang at the top of our voices all the way home. When I think about it, quite a feat. 1 man, 1 woman, in charge of up to 12 kids at the beach, and enough food for all of us at lunchtime. Older kids always looked out for the younger ones. I loved visiting another aunt who had a pianola. A myriad of pianola rolls which you could pedal fast to sound like the Chipmunks or slowly to produce a drawl. She had some wonderful tunes. My aunt always had a tray of homemade ice cream, as she had a fridge freezer, a great treat. We had an ice chest, also a copper and hand wringer in the laundry, later a top-load washing machine with automatic wringer. A man used to come around selling clothes props. This was a long piece of tree branch with a fork at the top. This was used to hold up the line so the heavy washing would not drag on the ground, way before Hills hoists were invented. We lived near a power station, and occasionally smoke and ash from there would cover the washing, and all needed to be washed again. We had a chip heater for the bath, and all us kids would bath one after another, or sometimes two at a time, in the same bath water. My dad was a cabinet maker and brought home offcuts and scraps to fuel the fire for the chip heater and the wood stove. My dad also made all our kitchen cupboards, wardrobes, bedheads, beds, and a very fancy glory box, as well as many fabulous dance props during our student career, including a prop violin, a great masterpiece. I was always a goody-goody at school, but a difficult child at home. I caused many heartaches for my parents and myself. If I had my time over, I would like to do this differently. We had a 2-bedroom house and often had other disadvantaged people staying with us. The church would ask Mum to house an abandoned mother and child and the like for a few days or weeks, which inevitably turned into months. Mum was a soft touch on that score, but ruled the family with great discipline. We all had chores to do. I have no idea where everyone slept. My sister and I had a bed in the partitioned-off lounge room for quite some time. Later, my dad converted what had been his work shed to a bedroom for the older boys, and my sister and I then moved into the second bedroom. We kept chooks, grew tomatoes, lemons and other veggies from time to time. Chocos grew prolifically on our back fence and were a staple part of our diet. I'm not sure if chocos even exist today. I haven't seen them in the supermarket. No supermarkets back then, and I remember biscuits being sold at our local corner store in a brown paper bag. The storekeeper served them from a big square Arnott's tin with the parrot logo on the top. Occasionally, Mum would send me to buy a penny worth of broken biscuits. I always ate some on the way home, of course. Saturday was counter lunch at the Breen household. Stacks of fresh bread, ham sandwiches were laid on the kitchen table, and everyone just dropped in for a chat. All my brother's mates, cousins and others came. Great atmosphere, noisy and fun. Mum was a fine seamstress and sewed many bridal and bridesmaids' gowns for family, friends and neighbours. When I was a teenager, our dance studio was involved in some of the first live shows on TV. I was part of the dance team in those early days, a great experience. I travelled to the city to an all-girls high school. I was given an allowance of 10 shillings, $1, a week. This was to cover my bus fare to and from school, my school stockings and lunch at the tuck shop if I didn't bring sandwiches from home. I worked as an office junior after leaving school and at another stage between shows at a dry cleaner with my brother. These are the only non-dance related jobs I have ever held. At the dry cleaner, I was trained by Miss Wattie, who would only accept things done the right way. I learnt amongst other things to correctly fold a jacket or coat and place in the bag. Doing things the right way is a great skill to carry through life. These days you collect your dry cleaning on a hanger. In my career I danced in various musical theatre and variety shows and was almost always fully employed, travelling through Australia and New Zealand. When working for the Tivoli circuit, we changed the show every 6 weeks. The show would begin in Melbourne, where they had their own team of dancers, and then move to Sydney. We would rehearse the new show in the daytime for 4 weeks, while performing the current show 8 performances a week. No rehearsal pay in those days. However, my take-home money was almost 4 times that what I had been paid as an office junior. My first show travelled by train to Melbourne, then Adelaide, then Perth. The company required us back in Sydney quickly for the next production, so decided to fly us home. The girls I was flatting with and I had way too much weight in our luggage by then. We packed our bag and dragged it to the local chemist, where there was always a penny in the slot machine waiting out the front to weigh. We did this several times after removing things from our bag until we came within the weight limit. We ended up wearing many hot layers home on the plane. My first ever plane trip. In Auckland, there was another show at the other theatre, and of course all cast members would meet up after the show. Alan Brown, a trombone player, was travelling with the other show, the Cherry Blossom Show, and the rest is history. We married in 1964. I was ballet mistress, in charge of all dancers and singers, and understudy to some of the main roles with the Black and White Minstrel Show, which completed its tour in Brisbane in 1965. Alan had been travelling with the show as backstage sound engineer. He was employed in the next few shows as a trombone player in the pit at Her Majesty's Theatre Brisbane, so we stayed in Brisbane for a while. I was then offered a dance job at Channel 7 Brisbane for their live TV shows. I also choreographed some of these shows when our choreographer took ill. I worked there till late 1967. With Paul Atto, we established the Southern Academy of Dance in October 1965, which still trains young dancers today. Many of our dancers have gone on to famous musical theatre careers all over the world. Other students moved into careers in business, education, art, painting and medicine, amongst others. All attribute to their success to the commitment, teamwork and training they received in dance class. Alan then became principal player of bass trombone with the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. It was sure then we would remain in Brisbane. We had our first child in 1968 and the next in 1971. Now we have 4 gorgeous grandchildren. Later, Alan formed the Alan Brown Big Band, and our senior dancers often performed with them. The band and dancers were always in high demand. The girls got to meet many stars, including Rhonda Birchmore, who was a wonderful performer. Richard Stevens and I formed a performance group for boys and girls within the studio in 1968. The group was named Kids Incorporated, and they learnt guitar, sang harmonies and of course danced. Most school holidays they would perform a daily half-hour show in local major shopping centres. This led to us having our own weekly TV show called It's a Small World. Students learnt completely new material to present each week. Every episode features a talent spot for other children. Some of these eventually joined the team. It was a busy but exciting time. Kids Incorporated also made their own record of 45 RPM. These students have remained great mates still today. In 2012, we took a group of Southern Academy students to perform in Disneyland, a great honour and experience. I had many jobs adjudicating dance competitions and the Stedfords over the years, and in 1987 took my examiner's exam with the Commonwealth Society of Teachers of Dancing. I have travelled throughout Australia and overseas in this role. I am currently Vice President, Senior Examiner and Technical Advisor for this society. Since moving to Brisbane, I have worked with many local groups and musical theatre societies, choreographing and rehearsing the team for performance. I have a great affinity with Ipswich and have produced many shows and performances there, working with Ipswich Musical Theatre, Orpheus Society, Ipswich City Council Cultural Division and Ipswich Events Corporation. Ipswich has a great band of talented and enthusiastic young people. My favourite was probably Street Shake, with 50 or 60 young people dancing down the main street. Most spectacular. I still help with choreography for Ipswich Seniors Performance Group and the Oxley CWA Choir. I became a member of Oxley CWA Choir and Performance Team early 1990. We still do an hour-long performance program for senior citizens clubs, retirement villages and nursing homes, which is extremely well received. In 2010, I was awarded OAM for services to dance and the community, a great and unexpected honour. I've had a few ups and downs with my health in later life, but with family and friends' support have come through it all so far. I have no regrets and have enjoyed family and friends to the full. In hindsight, the only thing I would change is to be a more confident and surer of my worth in childhood and teenage years. Undeniably, dance has brought out the best in me and made me the person I am. I am so proud of all my students, their achievements in many fields, and their general passion and commitment in all they do. A final line of wisdom: 1. Learn from every situation and experience. 2. Always show respect. 3. Find your passion and commit to it wholeheartedly.